The Lycan capital never slept. Not really. Moonspire thrummed with a pulse all its own, ancient, steady, territorial. Even from miles away, Lyria had seen the glow of its runes lighting the mountainside like veins of lunar fire. But standing at its gates now, the sight hit like a punch to the chest. White stone towers reached so high they pierced the clouds. Sprawling ramparts curved like the spine of a silver beast. Every inch of the city whispered of power, centuries of lineage, bloodshed, and unbroken dominance. Her boots made the faintest sound against the moonglass tiles. Each step echoed. And each echo answered with a whisper. That's her. Goddess, look at her eyes. The exile, why would the king allow her in? Lyria didn't look at them. Didn't let them see the way her pulse stuttered beneath her skin. Instead, she lifted her chin and kept walking, letting the wind tug her hood back just enough to reveal the truth of her face, caramel-brown skin glowing warm under the moonlight. Silver-ringed hazel eyes sharp as broken glass. Full lips pressed into a controlled, unreadable line. Curves carried like armor, soft where she chose, strong everywhere else. And still, they looked at her like she was a ghost walking. Her Lycan, Nyx, stirred in irritation. Let me out. I want to bite someone, Nyx growled. Lyria's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Not today. But gods, she wished she could. The gates creaked wider as she approached. Runes flared to life along the archway, scanning her presence with ancient magic. The guards shifted, hands tightening on their weapons, not in aggression, but in unease. State your purpose, one demanded. Lyria answered with a voice that did not shake. I was summoned. His gaze flicked over her curves, her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, looking for the danger they all feared. He didn't find it. That only made him more uneasy. She stepped inside. The city swallowed her whole. Shops shuttered for evening. Floating lanterns bobbed in the air like distant moons. The scent of steel, pine, smoke, and lichen filled her lungs. And above it all, high on a balcony overlooking everything, two figures watched her arrival. She felt it. Not with sight. With instinct. Nyx lifted her head sharply. The one on the right. That one feels like fire waiting for a spark. Lyria didn't look up. Not yet. High above the courtyard, in a massive balcony carved into the obsidian wall of the palace, Alpha Daesung stood with the rigid posture of a man carved from war. His broad shoulders rose and fell slowly, each breath measured, controlled, as though the weight of an entire kingdom rested on his lungs. It did. But the man beside him carried a different weight. A quieter one, a sharper one. Jae-min. The Alpha Prince. He stood with one hand braced on the stone railing, storm-grey eyes fixed on the horizon in a way that looked like he was studying the terrain, but he wasn't. He was avoiding his father. Again. The late sunlight caught in his black hair, the messy strands falling against his forehead in that infuriatingly perfect way, half prince, half predator. His shirt clung to him from training, outlining the carved lines of his chest, the sweep of muscle down his arms. Sweat still traced a faint trail along his jawline, catching on the subtle stubble he never bothered shaving on time. If the palace staff had seen him right now, there would have been fainting. Jae-min didn't care. He didn't care about much these days. Except the part of himself he couldn't control, and Daesung was tired of pretending not to notice. Your training ran late again, Daesung said without turning. Jae-min's jaw flexed. Better that than wasting daylight discussing politics. Daesung snorted. An alpha who hates politics. How fortunate for the kingdom. Jae-min didn't respond. He didn't need to. He only stared out at the city, tense as a bowstring. Daesung let the silence stretch before speaking again, because silence made his son uncomfortable, and Daesung used any advantage available. We will address the matter of your chosen mate at the solstice ceremony. His tone brooked no argument. Jae-min's fingers tightened against the railing hard enough that the stone groaned beneath them. He didn't look away from the horizon. I'm not choosing anyone, he said flatly. You are 27. The kingdom expects. Let them expect. I don't care. Daesung's gaze sharpened. Mina is the strongest alliance we have. I never promised her anything. You owe your kingdom stability. And you owe me autonomy, Jae-min snapped back before he could stop himself. Daesung turned then, slowly, with the cold, calm anger of a man who didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Autonomy. You are the prince, not a rogue scraping by in the woods. You do not get to choose your own path. Jae-min lifted his head, eyes slicing into his father's. I am not marrying Mina. You are, Daesung repeated, voice low. Whether you want to or not. Her family has supported ours for generations. Her bloodline is pure. She is disciplined, poised, and loyal. A perfect Luna. She's a snake, Jae-min snapped. Daesung smirked faintly. Snakes can be useful. Not to me. Your wants, Daesung said softly, are irrelevant. Jae-min's chest rose sharply. You said I'd be free to choose when the time came. And that was before the prophecy. Daesung's voice turned colder. Before we learned your mate would either save you or ruin you. A muscle in Jae-min's jaw ticked. He hated that prophecy. He hated what it made him fear inside himself. But Daesung wasn't done. A chosen mate eliminates that risk. A fated mate gives the moon goddess power over your crown. I will not tolerate that. Jae-min's hand curled into a fist. Daesung stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mina will make you stronger. The bond you fear is unnecessary. You don't need destiny. You need stability. Jae-min breathed through his teeth. I don't need her. I wasn't asking if you want her, Daesung said. You're obtaining her. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with old resentment and new wounds. Then Daesung exhaled slowly through his nose, redirecting his gaze toward the courtyard below. Now, he said, tone shifting from father to king, enough about your refusal to cooperate. We have another matter. Jae-min didn't look curious. But he did look relieved for the subject change. A girl arrives tonight, Daesung said. Jae-min's brows twitched. A girl. An outsider, Daesung clarified. Exiled from her pack. Rumored to carry traces of ancient moon magic. Jae-min scoffed. Rumored. That's your favorite word. Daesung ignored him. She will be evaluated for integration into our ranks. Jae-min sighed. And this is my problem because you are the one who will evaluate her. That got his attention. Jae-min turned his head sharply. No. Daesung raised one brow. What was that? I'm not babysitting an exile. This is not a request. No. Daesung stepped in front of him, blocking his view of the horizon. You are the prince. You will assess her. You will rank her. And if she proves useful, you will make room for her. You're assigning me to Outcast management now? I'm assigning you to leadership. Jae-min laughed under his breath, bitter. She won't last a day. Then you'll confirm that, Daesung said. Jae-min opened his mouth to argue again. But something in the courtyard below shifted. A ripple of energy. Soft but unmistakable. Jae-min's body reacted before his brain did. A subtle straightening of the spine, a tightening through his chest, a flare of awareness he didn't recognize and didn't want. Daesung followed his gaze. There, the Alpha King murmured. Look. Jae-min didn't want to, but he did. And below, stepping through the courtyard gates like a challenge wrapped in curves and moonlit skin. Lyria walked into Moonspire. Her hood had fallen back. Her curls framed her face like a crown she didn't ask for. Those silver-ringed hazel eyes flicked across the courtyard, guarded but unbroken. Jae-min's fingers twitched on the railing. He didn't know her. Didn't know her name. Didn't know her story. But something primal inside him, deep, buried, feral, shifted. Rakan stirred inside him. A low, territorial rumble vibrated under Jae-min's skin. No. Absolutely not. He tore his gaze away instantly, jaw clenching hard enough to ache. Daesung watched him carefully. Well, the Alpha King murmured, almost amused, it seems fate brings interesting things to our doorstep. Jae-min's voice was gravel. She's nothing. Daesung smiled. Then why, he asked, did you look at her twice? Jae-min didn't answer. Because he couldn't. The gates sealed shut behind Lyria with a heavy clang, leaving her standing at the threshold of Moonspire's inner courtyard, a vast, circular expanse of moonstone tiles etched with glowing runes that pulsed like a heartbeat. She inhaled slowly. This was it. There was no going back now. The courtyard stretched wide before her, illuminated by floating lanterns of soft blue flame. They drifted lazily through the air, casting shifting shadows on the stone walls. The fountain at the center arched streams of enchanted water that glittered like strands of starlight. Everything was beautiful. In that sharp, intimidating way a blade could be beautiful. But beauty wasn't what met her first. Silence did. A silence so heavy, so calculated, that it pressed against her skin like cold fingers. Dozens of warriors occupied the space, training, sparring, cleaning weapons, and every single one of them stopped when she entered. The clang of metal. The rhythm of fists meeting practice dummies. The murmured conversations. All of it died. Lyria kept walking anyway. Her steps echoed through the courtyard, louder than they should have been. She felt each stair land on her like a weight. Felt judgment thicken the air around her. Felt the whispers starting again, soft, sly, slithering. Is that her? The exile? She doesn't look cursed. That's what makes it worse. Moon goddess help us. Nyx bristled in her mind, hackles lifting. Weaklings. Look how they hide their fear behind gossip. Not now, Lyria replied silently. She would not let her Lycan take offense, not here, not on unfamiliar ground surrounded by wolves who would use any excuse to tear her down. The warriors' expressions ranged from curiosity to hostility. Some looked confused as if trying to reconcile the rumors with the woman before them. Others openly sneered, already convinced she was beneath them. And a few, the dangerous ones, simply watched her with the cold focus of hunters evaluating unfamiliar prey. No welcome. No escort. No guidance. Exactly as she'd expected. The palace guards at the courtyard's opposite end stood even straighter as she approached, their hands drifting toward their sheathed blades, not as a threat, but as a precaution. As if the mere chance of her existing closer than 10 feet made their palms itch. When she drew near, the guard captain cleared his throat. "You're earlier than anticipated." He didn't say it like a greeting. He said it like an inconvenience. "I'll keep that in mind next time," Lyria replied, her tone polite but laced with steel. He blinked, caught off guard by her boldness. Warriors nearby exchanged looks. She wasn't timid. That alone made her suspicious. "You'll wait here," the captain continued, recovering his posture. "The Alpha Prince will decide how to receive you." Lyria's stomach tightened. The Alpha Prince. She had heard of him, everyone had. Cold. Disciplined. Relentless. Raised not just to lead, but to conquer. She swallowed once, steady. Very well. As she stood there under dozens of watching eyes, the courtyard door to the palace's upper level opened with a low groan. A ripple, almost physical, moved through the crowd. Lyria felt the shift before she saw him. Jae-min descended the stairs with the controlled grace of someone who'd been trained to make every movement a display of dominance. His dark shirt clung to the firm lines of his torso, the leather braces on his forearms gleamed faintly under lantern light. Storm-gray eyes scanned the courtyard with detached disinterest, assessing threats, dismissing the unimportant. He didn't look at her first. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to tighten the air. Warriors straightened instinctively. Some bowed. Some stepped back. Jae-min didn't acknowledge any of it. When he finally did turn toward her, the look that crossed his face was not curiosity. Not interest. Just irritation, the kind that sparked before a storm. Lyria squared her shoulders. She refused to shrink. Jae-min stopped several paces from her, gaze trailing over her face with the cold calculation of a man accustomed to reading battlefields. "You're the outcast they sent?" he asked, voice flat as stone. A few warriors snickered under their breath. Lyria ignored them. "I have a name," she said calmly. He stared at her a long moment. Then, "I didn't ask." A flicker of heat flashed under her skin, anger or humiliation. She wasn't sure. Nyx snarled inside her, pushing forward. "Let me show him who he's speaking to." "No," Lyria snapped inwardly. She forced her jaw to unclench. forced her breath to stay steady. Jae-min watched her response with faint, cold amusement, as if waiting for her to break character. When she didn't, something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. Not interest. Not attraction. Recognition. Not of her, but of her defiance. He despised it. The wind shifted between them. Her scent, warm, sweet, edged with a primal undertone, brushed past him. Jae-min stiffened. Rakan surged beneath his skin, tail lashing, teeth bared in a silent territorial snarl. Jae-min forced him back down with practiced discipline. No reaction. No weakness. Not here. Follow, he commanded, turning his back on her completely. A command. Not an invitation. He didn't check to see if she obeyed. But Lyria heard the captain mutter quietly behind her, shaking his head, "Good luck, girl. The Alpha Prince doesn't tolerate outsiders." Lyria inhaled deeply, steadying herself before stepping forward. The inner courtyard watched her go. Some with interest, some with disdain, some with fear. But all with the same thought: the exile had arrived. And Moonspire would never be the same. The moment Jae-min turned his back on the exile, he regretted coming down here at all. He didn't have time for this. He didn't have patience for this. And he damn sure didn't have interest in whatever charity case his father had dragged into Moonspire. He walked across the courtyard with long, controlled strides, keeping his expression cold and unreadable. Around him, warriors straightened instinctively, some bowing, some stepping aside, all careful not to draw his attention. He preferred it that way. Silence. Order. Control. But for the first time all day, control felt thinner. Because he could feel her behind him. Not her footsteps, though he heard those. Not her breath, though he noticed when it hitched at the sudden shift in temperature. Not even her heartbeat, though his sharp ears caught that too, steady despite the pressure around her. What he felt was her presence. A weight. A warmth. A pressure low in his gut that Rakan immediately reacted to. The Lycan inside him prowled the edges of his consciousness, ears pinned forward, hackles raised. "She's watching us," Rakan growled. "Everyone watches," Jae-min shot back. "Not like this." Jae-min clenched his jaw. He refused to look back again. Once was an accident. Twice was an indulgence. A third time was a weakness, one he would never allow. He forced his attention on the path ahead as he led her toward the palace entry. The air around them shifted with every step, tension curling tight like invisible wire. Behind him, she moved with a quiet strength that irritated him more than it should have, her stride steady, unbowed, unhurried. He hated that about her already. Too confident for an exile. Too composed for someone walking into the lion's den. Too something. He didn't have the word for it yet. He inhaled sharply, and that's when her scent hit him fully. Warm. Soft. But underneath it, a wild, ancient note he had no name for. Rakan snapped his teeth inside his skull. Jae-min felt the Lycan push forward hard enough to crack his breath. "Warn her," Rakan rumbled. "Threaten her. Something about her isn't right." Jae-min growled under his breath. "Shut up." He reached the shaded archway leading into the palace and finally stopped, turning to face her with the intent to dismiss her quickly and efficiently. And she was closer than he expected. Much closer. Her eyes locked onto his with irritating steadiness, silver-ringed hazel catching the lantern light like shattered moonlight. He felt the hit of her gaze in his chest. Annoyance tightened his jaw. She didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Didn't defer her gaze as most wolves did in the presence of an alpha's authority. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't disrespect. Just refusal to shrink. Jae-min hated how interesting that was. His voice came out lower than intended. "What exactly were you sent here for?" Lyria's expression didn't change. "I believe that's what you're supposed to decide." A few warriors nearby sucked in a breath. Jae-min stared at her for a long, slow moment until the air between them felt thick enough to cut. Rakan pressed forward again. "She's dangerous. Everyone is dangerous." It was the only thought Jae-min allowed himself. He turned slightly, letting his gaze sweep her from head to toe, not as a man assessing a woman, but as a commander studying a threat. Her posture was impeccable. Her breathing controlled. Her scent steady. He could read a fighter when he saw one. "You don't look like an exile," he said. "And you don't look particularly welcoming," she replied. Several warriors choked on their own breath. Jae-min's lips twitched almost a smile, but he swallowed it before it could take shape. He stepped closer. Just a fraction. Just enough to test her. Most wolves would step back out of instinct, out of respect. She didn't move. Rakan growled with approval. Jae-min shoved him down again. "She's a problem," he muttered under his breath. Nyx must have heard him, because Lyria's gaze sharpened, though her expression remained cool. "Do you always analyze people out loud?" she asked, "or am I just special?" Jae-min exhaled hard through his nose. Gods, she was irritating. Finally, he tore his gaze away from her and faced the palace doors again. "You're here for evaluation," he said, voice clipped. "You'll be tested in combat, endurance, and discipline." "By whom?" she asked. "Me." He didn't turn to see her reaction, didn't want to, but he felt her surprise ripple through the air. "And if I don't meet your standards?" she pressed. He paused. He could have said she'd be dismissed. He could have said she'd be sent back. He could have said she didn't matter. But instead, what came out was, "You will." A statement. Not a reassurance. He didn't know why he said it. He regretted it instantly. Before she could reply, the palace doors opened behind them, and a palace messenger appeared, bowing low. "Your Highness," he said to Jae-min. "The king requests your presence immediately." Of course he did. Jae-min nodded once, then looked at Lyria again, quick, sharp, unavoidable. Her eyes met his, steady as ever. That same unfamiliar pressure pushed low in his stomach. He hated that too. "You'll be escorted to the court hall," he said. "I don't need an escort." "You do," he countered, stepping past her. "This palace eats outsiders alive." She didn't reply. Good. Because for the first time in years, Jae-min didn't trust himself to interpret a stranger's silence. As he walked away, something inside him whispered. Not Rakan this time. Something quieter. Unwelcome. "You should have looked longer." He ignored it. He always did. But he still felt her gaze on his back long after he left the courtyard. And that irritated him more than anything else had all night. Sound didn't travel here the same way. Every footstep was swallowed by plush carpets woven in deep indigo and silver. Every flicker of torchlight bowed low against polished stone. Portraits of past rulers lined the walls, their painted eyes following Lyria as she walked. Her escort, a young palace guard with eyes that kept darting anywhere but at her, said nothing. He kept 3 steps ahead, shoulders too stiff for someone supposedly at ease in his own home. He stopped at an enormous set of carved doors, their surface covered in intertwining wolves and moons, all etched in silver. "The king is expecting you," he said. Lyria nodded, fingers tightening at her sides once before she forced them to relax. "Thank you." He shifted, as though he wanted to say more. Maybe a warning. Maybe apology. Instead, he bowed shortly and moved away. She was alone again. Fine. She exhaled slowly, feeling Nyx's presence pressing calmly against her mind. "Steady," Nyx murmured. "We've faced worse than a room full of wolves who think they're better than us." Lyria's mouth twitched. "You always know how to comfort me." "I'm not here to comfort. I'm here to remind you you're not prey." Before Lyria could reply, the doors swung inward. Light flooded toward her. She stepped inside. The throne hall was enormous. High arched ceilings covered in shimmering frescoes of wolves, moons, and battle scenes stretched above her. Tall windows framed the far wall, revealing a slice of darkening sky streaked with the last colors of sunset. Runes glowed faintly along the pillars, humming with old power. Benches and rows of elevated seating lined both sides of the hall, already populated by nobles, high-ranking warriors, and elders. Their clothing ranged from practical leathers to elaborate silks. Jewels glittered. Crest pins shone. Every scent in the room, pride, power, suspicion, hit her at once. Silence met her again. Then a low murmur rippled through the assembly. "That must be her. She looks ordinary." Her eyes. Look at her eyes. At the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, sat Alpha Daesung. He was not dressed for war, but power clung to him all the same. His dark hair was shot with a few streaks of silver at the temples, his jaw set in a way that said compromise was not his natural state. The crown circled his brow, simple, made of polished moonstone and obsidian, more symbol than decoration. To his right stood Jae-min, now cleaned and dressed in formal attire, black tunic, fitted trousers, a silver chest clasp bearing the royal crest. His hair was pulled back, revealing that sharp jawline and the controlled hardness in his eyes. If he'd been sweating in the courtyard, there was no trace of it now. He didn't move when she entered. Didn't speak. But he watched. To Daesung's left stood a woman Lyria didn't need introduced to know she was trouble. Mina. Tall, graceful, groomed to almost unnatural perfection. Her hair was sleek and dark, arranged in a style that framed her fine-boned features. Eyes like crystal ice. Lips curved in the kind of smile that never quite reached those eyes. Her dress was a masterpiece of political messaging, dark blue silk trimmed in silver, the crest of her family pinned at her shoulder, subtle enough to be tasteful, clear enough to be seen from across the hall. Mina looked at Lyria like she was mud tracked across a polished floor. Lyria held her gaze for a beat, then shifted her attention to the king. She bowed, not deeply enough to grovel, but low enough to show respect. Your Majesty. Rise, Daesung said, his voice low and resonant enough to carry easily through the hall. She straightened. His eyes took her in the same way Jae-min's had earlier, but where the prince had been evaluating her as a fighter, Daesung evaluated her like a ruler. Weighing. Measuring. Assessing her usefulness. You are Lyria of Hollow Shade, he said. The name twisted inside her. Exile burned hot beneath her ribs, but she kept her expression even. I was Lyria of Hollow Shade, she corrected quietly. I no longer belong to any pack. Murmurs rose again. Bold. They'd call that bold. Daesung's brows lifted a fraction. You correct your king. I correct the record, Lyria replied. If I am to stand in your hall, I'd rather do so with the truth on my tongue. Jae-min's gaze sharpened. Mina's lips curled. Daesung studied her for a moment more, then nodded once. Very well. Lyria, formerly of Hollow Shade. You have been permitted entrance into Moonspire on unusual terms. Her stomach tightened. Yes, Your Majesty. There are claims, he continued, leaning back slightly in his seat, that your exile was not due to incompetence, but fear. A hush swept the room. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Fear. Lyria swallowed. Of course that's how they'd frame it. Daesung's eyes narrowed. They say your alpha could not control you. That's one way of putting it, she said. What would you call it? Her heart pounded. Nyx pressed close, steady. Say it, her Lycan urged. No more shrinking. Lyria took a breath. My alpha, she said slowly, could not control what he refused to understand. I warned him. He chose fear over reason. So he did what fearful men do when they don't know how to handle what they can't explain. And what is that? Daesung asked. He called it a curse and cast it out. The hall erupted in whispers again, louder this time. Accusation. Curiosity. Disbelief. Daesung lifted a hand and the room fell silent. His attention did not waver from her. These abilities you speak of. A faint edge crept into his voice. Moon magic. I don't know what to call it, she answered honestly, only that it has been with me since I was a child, and that it grows stronger with the moon. An elder somewhere on the left muttered, blasphemy, under his breath. Another, a woman with silver hair braided tightly back, watched Lyria with sharp interest instead. Mina finally spoke, her voice smooth and sweet like something poured over poison. Your Majesty, with respect, we allow an exile into the heart of the capital, and now we are entertaining tales of unsanctioned magic. She tilted her head slightly, eyes never leaving Lyria. Surely there must be stricter protocols. The words were polite. The tone was anything but. Lyria's jaw tightened. Daesung didn't look at Mina. You overstep, Mina. She dropped her gaze, but only slightly. Of course, my king. My concern is only for your safety. And that of Jae-min. Mina's eyes slid to the prince on that last word, softening, inviting. She touched his forearm lightly, as though the gesture were natural. Jae-min didn't react. Didn't look at her. His focus stayed on Lyria. Lyria pretended not to notice. She kept her shoulders squared, her hands relaxed at her sides. Whether her claims are true or not, Daesung said, we do not act on rumors. We test. We verify. We decide. He leaned forward again. You are here on a provisional basis. You will be placed with our warriors. You will train. You will be observed. His gaze flicked to Jae-min. My son will oversee your evaluation. The murmur that followed that statement was more like a wave. The prince. The exile. Together. Perfect fodder for palace gossip. Lyria did not let her discomfort show. Understood. Mina's smile tightened. And if she fails? Daesung finally turned to her. Then she is removed from the capital. Permanently. Lyria's skin prickled. No second chances, then. Jae-min spoke for the first time. She won't fail. The words surprised the room. They surprised Lyria. They even seemed to surprise him. Mina's head snapped toward him, eyes wide for a fraction of a second. You sound confident. Jae-min's expression remained blank. I'm confident in my ability to determine who does and does not belong here. His gaze locked with Lyria's again for a second, sharp, unreadable. Then he looked away. Daesung nodded slowly. Then it settled. Lyria will be placed under your supervision. The king shifted his focus back to her. Know this, he said. Moonspire is not a sanctuary. It is not a refuge. It is the heart of Lycan power. If you are here, you contribute. If you are a threat, you are removed. If you are a liar, you are punished. I understand, Lyria said softly. Good. You will be given quarters and summoned at dawn for your first evaluation. He waved a hand. You are dismissed. The formal phrase made something twist in her. She hated how small dismissed sounded. But she bowed again and turned to leave. As she walked back down the aisle, she felt their stares on her back, measuring, hating, doubting, quietly hoping she'd either fail or prove herself worth paying attention to. Just before she reached the doors, she heard Mina's voice, low but clear. She's not one of us. She never will be. Another voice followed, unexpected and rough-edged. We'll see. Jae-min. Lyria didn't look back. But she heard every word, and for the first time since she'd crossed Moonspire's gates, something inside her stopped bracing for impact and started bracing for war. Moonspire was different at night. The noise faded, the judgment quieted, and the city's ancient magic, usually buried beneath pride and politics, rose like mist from the stones themselves. By the time Lyria reached the quarters assigned to her, exhaustion tugged at her limbs. Not from the journey. From the stairs. The whispers. The weight of walking into a kingdom that had decided who she was before she ever had the chance to speak. Her room was tucked into a far corner of the palace. Small, cold, intentionally distant from the main warrior halls. A message. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Silence welcomed her first. Then moonlight. A narrow balcony overlooked the moonlit spires of Moonspire, and for a moment, the view stole her breath. The city glowed under the rising full moon, runes humming, lanterns floating, the faint howl of a distant patrol piercing the night. Home to thousands. A kingdom built on discipline and blood. Yet somehow, she had never felt more alone. She removed her cloak, tossing it onto the simple chair. Fingers trembled for a moment, just one little shake, and she clenched them to stillness. Nyx spoke softly in her mind. You did well. Lyria almost laughed. Did I? You stood tall. You didn't bow down. That is enough for today. Lyria leaned against the balcony railing and let the cold night air brush over her skin. Her curls shifted lightly in the breeze. Her heartbeat slowed. She replayed the day, the courtyard, the throne hall, Daesung's testing questions, Mina's venom, the court's razor-edged stares. And then, Jae-min. His eyes. Cold, unreadable. Sharp enough to slice through her defenses without ever raising his voice. She hated that he'd gotten under her skin so quickly. She also hated the flicker of something unfamiliar when he'd stepped closer. Not attraction. Not fear. Recognition. A strange, instinctual tug Nyx had refused to explain. "Don't start," Lyria muttered under her breath. "I didn't say anything." Lyria sighed. "You're thinking loudly," she added. Nyx chuckled softly, the sound dark and amused. "So is he." Lyria stiffened. "What do you mean?" "His Lycan. Rakan. He felt us. That doesn't mean anything." "Ahoo." Nyx stretched lazily. "Yep, keep telling yourself that." Lyria gripped the balcony a little too tightly. The last thing she needed was complications with the Alpha Prince. She was here to survive, to train, to figure out what the Moon Goddess wanted from her. Nothing more. Nothing involving storm gray eyes or a Lycan that growled at her presence. She exhaled slowly, letting her tension spill into the moonlight. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Tomorrow, I prove myself." Nyx hummed approval. "Tomorrow, little Lycan, we rise." Elsewhere in the palace, Jae-min stood in the training yard long after the last warrior left. Night wind ruffled his hair, cooled his skin. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, muscles still taut from earlier sparring. He'd driven himself through extra rounds, hoping the ache in his body would drown the irritation in his mind. It didn't. He rolled his shoulders, scowling into the empty yard. Lyria. The exile with the steady eyes and unshaking voice. The one who didn't flinch under his gaze. The one whose scent had hit him like a blow to the gut. He hated how aware he'd been of her, still was. Rakan paced at the edges of his control, restless, agitated. "You saw her," the Lycan growled. "You felt." "Enough," Jae-min snapped aloud, voice cutting through the dark. The Lycan snarled back but quieted. He dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Why her? Out of every warrior, every noble, every threat. Why did his instincts sharpen around a stranger who hadn't even shown her teeth yet? Danger. That's what he'd felt. Not attraction, not interest, not whatever the palace gossips would whisper if they saw the way he'd looked at her. A threat. That's all. He tried to convince himself of that. Tried harder than he should have. But the memory of her voice kept slipping through, the calm steel in it, the quiet confidence, the refusal to shrink. He hadn't expected that. He didn't like unexpected things. Jae-min turned away from the training grounds and walked toward the palace interior. His strides were clipped, precise, a man fighting an agitation he refused to name. Two guards straightened as he passed. "Your Highness," one said, bowing. "Has the exile been settled in her quarters?" Jae-min asked before he could stop himself. Both guards blinked, surprised at the question. "Yes, Prince Jae-min," one replied. "She arrived some minutes ago." "Good." The word came too fast. Too sharp. He walked away before they could ask why he cared. As he ascended the stone stairs toward the upper levels, he paused at a window overlooking the smaller balcony where Lyria now stood. She was only a silhouette against moonlight from this distance, hair shifting in the wind, posture strong despite the weight she carried. Rakan pressed forward. "Ours," the Lycan whispered. Jae-min's throat tightened. "No." A low, dangerous rumble shook his core. "Liar." Jae-min shut his eyes hard and forced the Lycan down, locking him behind walls built over years of discipline. "Whatever she is," Jae-min muttered to himself, turning away from the window, "she won't last." But even he felt the hollowness in his words. Because deep down, somewhere he refused to explore, something else whispered back, "She will." Moonspire breathed heavily in the dark, preparing for something none of them could name yet. And as the night deepened, both Lyria and Jae-min stood alone on opposite sides of the palace. Eyes lifted to the same moon, hearts steady but unsettled, wolves restless, and the bond, quiet, ancient, uninvited, took its very first breath.